When we last left our heroes, we were getting ready to talk about wireless. Wireless networks are becoming more widespread, less insecure potentially, but there are still some issues to be dealt with. The fact that they're portable and require less infrastructure to install and maintain, that's good. I mean, it's a lot cheaper than running cabling everywhere. However, it's as easy and fun and inexpensive as wireless networks are. They have their own unique suite of security issues. So let's talk about some of those. A couple of things you actually have control over in your wireless environment. And antenna placement and design. Basically, there's a couple of different types of antennas. There are your so-called omnidirectional antennas in the convenient rubber duck style versus the ceiling dome. Rubber duck, small omnidirectional kind of little like a stub sort of antenna. Generally, it's rubberized. Small gain, small size. They're small. They're portable. But again, an antenna of that style isn't going to give you a lot of signal capability. So you're going to be compromised in that way. You might have to be a lot closer than you otherwise would. This is what you see on your basic walkie-talkies or two-way radio sort of things. But they're not directional. Whereas then you get the ceiling dome. Basically, it's again a typical antenna like you might find inside in a room that gives you coverage throughout the room. Now, then your more specific directional type antennas. The Yagi antenna, if you look it up, you'll see, hey, this looks like a TV antenna. It's very similar to old style TV antenna, used primarily in radio, but again, it's found its way into the wireless space as well. A parabolic antenna, that's sort of like a dish type antenna. Those give you better sort of directionality, line of sight kind of thing. More gain typically. Backfire, again, it's similar to a true parabolic, even though it's a dish. It doesn't have the extended range of a parabolic antenna. And I mentioned the CAN antenna the other day. The concept, you want to look that up, go on a Wikipedia or Google or something. Basically, you've got like a Pringles can, right? Those potato chip deals in that kind of cylindrical container, metal foil, sort of foil lining in there, and you just manufacture an antenna out of a Pringles can. Gives you a pretty decent directional antenna. Again, with wireless, you've only got a couple of parameters you can control, and one of those parameters is antenna placement, antenna design as well. And the other thing you have control over is output power. With these wireless networks, I mean, you're restricted by the countries, like in the U.S., FCC regulations, Federal Communication Commission, and there's only so much you can do with that. But you can reduce output power. Between using directional antennas and reducing your output power, you can create a reasonably secure kind of smaller space where you have wireless access without that wireless signal kind of slopping out of the room or into the parking lot below to where pretty much anybody can grab your signal. So again, different antenna types, you'll probably see some reference to one or two of these on the exam. I've seen Yagi on there before. And again, that's that old school TV antenna looking thing. Our 802.11 standards. These are IEEE 802.11 standards. And these, the ones you're looking at on the slide, these are your actual RF, your radio frequency standards. there are other 802.11 standards that are not specifically RF standards. For example, 802.11i, that standard covers wireless security. 802.11j covers specifics to the Japanese environment. And again, there are certain standards that are not RF standards, but these are the ones you need to primarily worry about. And there's a whole bunch of wireless gibberish in this section here. So let's kind of go over some of that. Originally, back in the dawn of time, there was the original 802.11 protocol, 802.11. What it does not say here, and it should probably, 802.11 used a technology known as FHSS, frequency hopping spread spectrum. I'll kind of go to my pad over here. (802.11) frequency hopping spread spectrum. Okay, one of the original techniques for using multiple frequencies. This is kind of developed during wartime to throw the enemy off so they couldn't track our communications. Operates in the 2.4 gigahertz frequency range. Okay, and had and the thing about 802.11, it was pretty much restricted to looks like about 2 megabits. Not a super fast standard. You're lucky to get 1 megabit out of it. Okay. 802.11a uses something called orthogonal frequency division multiplexing, OFDM. Orthogonal frequency division multiplexing. Okay. This guy operates in the 5 gigahertz frequency range and has a top speed of 54 megabits. Much better. Okay, 54 megabits. But again, the key thing, he's operating in the 5 gigahertz frequency range. Now, then we have 802.11b. 802.11b was the first thing that was commercially sort of successful out there in the marketplace. The term Wi-Fi is generally associated with 802.11b. 802.11b uses a technology called DSSS, direct sequence spread spectrum, and it was basically an improvement over frequency hopping spread spectrum. Frequency hopping used multiple frequencies, but used them one after the other, kind of round robin style. Okay, so the jump to DSSS, direct sequence spread spectrum, used the same frequency range, but used those frequencies simultaneously. And I think you can understand how that would increase the throughput. And as you can see, it went from 2 megabits to 11 megabits. Okay, anything else interesting there? And they're talking about range and so on. Generally speaking, with wireless transmissions, the lower frequency ranges have the lower the frequency. Like, in other words, all things being equal, a 2.4 gigahertz technology is going to have greater range than a 5 gigahertz technology. The lower frequency range has a greater effective actual range. Okay, now let's talk about 802.11g a little bit. Now, G basically uses OFDM, just like 802.11a. Now, G operates in the 2.4 gigahertz range, and when it's operating in its native OFDM mode, it gives you a 54 megabit range throughput. Now, here's the deal. You can take your 802.11g technology and make it compatible, backwards compatible with 802.11b. Now notice they use different techniques at OFDM versus DSSS. So if you wanted to make your 802.11g network backwards compatible with 802.11b, you could do that. But what you would do was it would dumb down your 802.11g device to DSSS and effectively slowing its maximum speed down to 11 megabits. So you're giving up a lot to achieve that interoperability there. All right. Nowadays, though, kind of the predominant technology out there is, hang on, 802.11n. 802.11n. And this guy, I'm not sure just which technologies that thing uses, but he operates the thing that's important here. It operates in the 2.4 and or the 5 gigahertz band with multiple antenna sections. You know, each one operating independently, and the top speed of 802.11n, in theory, is about 600 megabits. And the way that works, and I've never seen this, and you won't either, is that basically it's the maximum speed is 150 megabits per spatial stream. So in other words, if I had, 4 separate antenna sections, each one of those could be operating at top speed of 150 megabits for a combined total of 600 megabits. There's also another term you're going to see associated with 802.11n. It's called MIMO, multiple input, multiple output. So in other words, it's, the standard supports having up as many as 4 antenna sections operating simultaneously for a theoretical maximum bandwidth of 600 megabits. The newest playa is 802.11 Alpha Charlie, and I am not sure whether or not Alpha Charlie has been ratified yet, but there's a lot of vendors that are hoping that their version is the one that actually becomes the standard, in which case they get a jump on the marketplace. But there's a lot of 802.11 Alpha Charlie stuff out there. He's operating the 5 gigahertz band, and in theory, data throughput is as high as 1,300 megabits. As you can see, that's pretty doggone substantial there as well. So some of those numbers you'll see. You'll see the you'll want to know the frequency ranges these guys operate in, and the effective throughput, max throughput. So kind of leave that up there. All right, back to my other deal. Okay, so again, there's a lot of information in this section here, but from a test perspective, they don't really ask you that much of it. Okay, wireless security protocols. Okay, there's kind of some stories to tell here. You've got first of all, you've got WEP, wired equivalent privacy. We talked about him before. Several different levels of encryption using a cipher called RC4. It was named after Ron Rivest. He's the R in RSA. So again, security hazard. Basically, WEP was discovered to have an IV vulnerability that affected the ability of that key to remain random, and it became predictable, and it was bad. And so again, WEP is effectively just broken. Pretty much any of you can go to the Google Play Store and download WEP crack utility for your smartphone and crack any WEP key. Okay, so there's that. One of these things is not like the other. See where it says WTLS? There is another protocol, not an 802.11 protocol, but it's a protocol called WAP, or Wireless Application Protocol. That's basically used in like cell phone networks, which is not an 802.11 network. So WTLS, Wireless Transport Layer Security, is the security protocol for WAP. So it's completely not anything having to do with Wi-Fi 802.11 standards like these other things are. So WTLS, separate thing. Why they put it on this list, I'm not sure. Okay, then we get into, and actually it's kind of an incomplete list, so let me kind of fill in a couple of blanks here. You've got, WEP is gone. We, draw a line through WEP. Replacing WEP was something called WPA, Wi-Fi Protected Access. Wi-Fi Protected Access introduced us to TKIP, Temporal Key Integrity Protocol, better than WEP encryption. And basically, the algorithm fixed a variety of things that was wrong with WEP. But turns out WPA was not as secure as they wanted it to be. The follow-on protocol to WPA was WPA2. WPA2 is basically an implementation of the 802.11i wireless security standards. WPA2 introduced us to AES, Advanced Encryption Standard in a Wireless Network. In the book, you'll also see a reference to AES with counter mode with cipher block chaining message authentication code. And that's at CCMP. That's essentially a message authentication technology to verify that the message integrity is intact. But you might see AES, CCMP together. Again, AES is more powerful, if you will, than TKIP. And, all things being equal, you should probably want to use the best security protocol available. The reality is many of your older devices don't yet support WPA2. And if some of those devices need to be on your wireless network, you may be required to use maybe WPA or, heaven forbid, even WEP. Okay, now, so it went WEP, WPA, WPA2. And the WEP provided its own encryption. WPA brought TKIP encryption, and WPA2 brought AES encryption. Now, there's other stuff that's on here. The 802.1x, not a misprint. That's the actual protocol. It's port-based authentication. And notice EAP, which is Extensible Authentication Protocol, which is an extension of a protocol called PPP, Point-to-Point Protocol. Anyway, WPA and WPA2 did WEP one better by having a separate authentication mode. With WEP, you had one key, and that key provided authentication and the encryption, which is really not the way you're supposed to do stuff. So they fixed that problem in the WPA, WPA2 family. So what you have there, and you can select, when you're configuring your device, you can have WPA in what's called personal mode, and then you've got WPA and WPA2 also in what's called enterprise mode. Now, personal mode is like what you'd have at your house. At your house, chances are pretty good you don't have a centralized authentication server like you would have at the enterprise level. So the personal mode essentially relies on what's known as a pre-shared key, a PSK, which effectively is you enter this pre-shared key as your authentication key, and the clients have the same key. So that enables you to authenticate to your machine at your house, basically, kind of a personal mode. Now, enterprise mode is better. Now, enterprise mode uses this 802.1x technology, which requires additional software. You have to configure the client specifically to support this, but basically it works like this. You have a wireless access point. Oh, by the way, this 802.1x also works in a wired environment. You might have an 802.1x compatible switch, but we're going to talk about the wireless aspect of it, and it works like this. On the inside, and let's see if they've got it written down here. They really don't, but they probably should. Well, we'll get there in a second. Anyway, on the inside of your system, you have what's known as a radius server. It stands for Remote Authentication Dial-In User Service, which is a centralized authentication server. The reality is, in a Microsoft Active Directory environment, the protocol running on your Server 2008 machine is something called NPS, Network Policy Server, which is Microsoft's implementation of Radius. So you've got this Radius server on the inside. Now on the outside, you've got your wireless access point. So if you're configured as for doing 802.1x authentication, the wireless client, that's you. You connect to the access point, just like you would normally do. You connect. Now at this stage in the process, the only traffic that the access point will accept from you is authentication traffic, or basically EAP traffic. So that gives you the opportunity to provide your authentication credentials to the access point. In this 802.1x environment, the access point is fulfilling a role known as the authenticator. So you provide your access credentials to the authenticator. He takes those credentials, securely kind of bundles them up, and sends them into the internal network to the Radius server. The Radius server verifies your credentials, and one of two things is going to happen, thumbs up or thumbs down. If you get a thumbs down, it's like, nope, sorry, and then the access point says, nope, sorry, try again. But let's assume that the credentials matched up. So the server says, yep, he's good, and let's use thus and such as our encryption key for this session with this guy. So we use different encryption keys for everybody that we're connected to. So the Radius server tells the access point he's good. The access point releases the port restrictions, and then you can now surf the internet and check email and all of that jazz. So again, that's a little more robust authentication mechanism than you will experience in personal mode. But if you had to pick and choose, the best wireless suite, you'd pick WPA2 with enterprise mode authentication and AES encryption. Okay, and if you take a look in the book in the section where they're talking about EAP, it's an authentication protocol, but there are multiple implementations of it. There's one called PEAP, Protected EAP, which is basically used in a Cisco environment, as is lightweight extensible authentication protocol, LEAP, also used in a Cisco environment. Again, there are several implementations of EAP, but just recognize that EAP stands for Extensible Authentication Protocol, and you'll be fine. Nobody gets hurt. Okay. Well, didn't we already talk about VPNs? Why, yes, we did. So everybody understands the dangers of connecting to an open wireless network. That means anybody can see what you're communicating and look at your traffic and so on. So again, at a minimum, you want to encrypt your data, because that protects your data to some degree. But ideally, you might want to use VPN technologies to communicate, because that not only secures your data, it also obscures your headers. Obscures your headers so that not only can you not read the data, you can't read where the packet originated, and that's important to protect your identity and your anonymity, and leave the clues out of the equation there. So they do make a further distinction that, hey, certain VPN protocols like the older PPTP, which is point-to-point tunneling protocol. Again, it's an older protocol, Microsoft protocol. It's been around since NT, but it's it's vulnerable to certain attacks, man-in-the-middle type attacks. So you should use, well, they specify IPsec, IPsec, or basically there's another Wi-Fi or a VPN protocol called L2TP, Layer 2 tunneling protocol, that uses IPsec for the encryption mechanism. So again, the choice of using an open network versus a VPN, if you have the opportunity, a VPN is probably the way to go on it. Wireless security methods, techniques, whatever. Configure access point settings. And there's a variety of settings listed in the book there. When you buy the access point, it comes with a default username and password, which everybody knows. You should have changed those things immediately so somebody else can't take over your access point and lock you out of your own access point. Configs, secure your router, change default administrator password and usernames, just talked about that. Disable remote administration. Even though remote administration sounds like a good idea, it's probably more dangerous than it needs to be, so you should probably just flat not use it. Secure/disable the reset function. The deal is, you've got your device configured to be secure, but if somebody remotely is able to exploit a flaw or do something to cause that thing to reset, during the reset process, there might be some limited periods of vulnerability where the appropriate security mechanisms haven't been initialized yet, and someone may be able to connect to your access point who shouldn't be able to, potentially. So the deal is, if you have a opportunity to, well, I mean, it sounds like a good idea. It sounds like, well, if something bad happens, I want to go ahead and reset and bring it back online. You may not want to do that because there may be security issues with doing that. So you want the thing, if it's hacked or if it's compromised some way and causes a system reset, you want to leave it that way until you physically get there and assess the issue in person, so that you can identify any potential security problems. Default SNMP parameters. I mean, SNMP, Simple Network Management Protocol, is a good thing. But again, that there's a database of information on your device that might be of interest to interested third parties. So by changing the default SNMP parameters to something that they don't know but you do, that keeps these interested third parties away from your system. Changing the default channel is more of a interference issue than anything else. I mean, these access points have a default channel assignment. Usually they're set to like channel 1, kind of thing. But if there's other access points in the same coverage area, you might have some serious interference problems. So analyze that and determine if another channel, up the spectrum, might be better in terms of not suffering from as much interference as the default channel. Upgrade the firmware periodically. Make sure you've got the latest and greatest version. Use MAC address filtering like we discussed before. Your SSID settings. The big thing there is, let's talk about what that's all about. One, that's the service set ID. That's your wireless network's name. If you've ever gone somewhere and down at the bottom of your screen there's a little wireless icon, you right click on it and you select View Available Wireless Networks, and then once you do that, you see a list of networks that you can then select from. The reason you see that list of networks is because it's standard operating procedure for access points to send out what are called beacon frames. These beacon frames, they go out periodically, but they contain information about about how to connect to the access point. Here's my name, here's my security requirements, here's my channel number. So basically the concept being the users, the clients, can essentially create a database of available access points and then, connect to them in the future kind of thing. So if you've got a secure network or network you'd like to be secure and you want to kind of hide it from prying eyes as much as you can, what you want to do is go into your configuration settings and uncheck the checkbox that says, broadcast SSID or whatever your particular access point configuration utility does. But the point is, if you turn off those beacon frames, then those casual observers will not see your network when they do a view available wireless networks because it's not advertising itself. So in much the same way as MAC address filtering doesn't completely protect you from all bad things, SSID cloaking doesn't either. But it keeps the riffraff out. But what it does not do is keep the determined hacker out. I mean, your network is still there. It's still sending traffic, and that traffic can certainly be intercepted by the bad guy. Just because you're not advertising yourself doesn't mean he can't turn on his sniffer and detect whatever traffic is out there, and then potentially learn enough about your network to potentially get on there. So again, the SSID cloaking thing. There you go. A lock is good. Keeps the honest man honest, but the dishonest man will find a way around that. It doesn't even have to be a super powerful lock necessarily. Just the fact that it's locked may be enough to deter, the casual observer kind of thing. So SSID cloaking is a good idea, but it certainly doesn't keep you completely protected from bad guys. Encryption, by and large, does. I mean, it's pretty much a big deal to try to crack decent encryption like AES encryption. So WPA2 gives you a better shot than does, say, WEP. The encryption is much stronger, and you can change the default keys. If you can avoid using personal mode, pre-shared keys, and use enterprise mode authentication, that's better. Network settings, anything good there? Now, again, the concept is you're a wireless guy. You're coming into essentially the same network that your wired clients are already on. They pick up an address from DHCP. You can pick up an address from DHCP, but the difference is this. With those wired clients, they've come in the building and gone through your security protocols and whatever. You may be connecting wireless from literally outside the building, potentially. So there's more of a security risk with wireless clients than wired clients, just due to the, lack of maybe solid, identification. So it's very common to include or to provide an IP address from a range of IP addresses specifically allocated to wireless clients, and those addresses may be in a subnet that has limited access to stuff, where your wired clients have unlimited access to stuff potentially. It's not required, but again, the book they mentioned assigns static IP addresses so that effectively you can control them and not put them on the equal footing with your wired clients who are who have obtained an address from DHCP. You can have DHCP provide addresses to your wireless clients out of a different pool and accomplish much the same thing as doing it manually. Use radius, as we described earlier. Use port-based authentication techniques to provide better authentication. Using a VPN, keep your information encrypted and your communication secure. Periodically scan. I mean, you the administrator, using like a wireless intrusion prevention sensor, a device whose job it is to kind of, it's like the eye of Sauron, kind of scanning around, Mordor for Frodo kind of a deal. We're looking for rogue access points that you need to then shut down and then kill the operator of said rogue access point. And then again, it's an ongoing thing. Once you've got your environment configured the way you want it, then you have to constantly monitor, make sure it's still performing up to standards. Antenna placement and power settings. Those are the two things you really have control over. Kind of just had that discussion just a little bit earlier there. And then your clients, you may not want to allow your clients to automatically connect to open Wi-Fi networks. You may want to kind of prevent that, so they can only connect to the networks that you specified potentially. You want to use your firewall technologies, both your network firewalls and your user-based, host-based firewalls as well. So take every advantage of the security features that are available in your environment in order to provide wireless safety. Okay, now here's a concept that's kind of new, but everybody's using it. It's called a captive portal. For example, at FSI, if you want to get on their wireless, that's great. You connect to the wireless, and then you have to go to a web page, and you have to read and accept the terms and conditions, and potentially you might have to log on with a password or something. But again, that's a way to ensure that your users are informed of procedures potentially or whatever, rather than just connecting to the access point and you're done. It's a two-step process. Connect to the access point and then connect to a web page to authenticate further or to enable the connection. Basically, you'll see this at airports and a variety of places now. So the term for that is captive portal. So now you're familiar with that. Your installation, let's say, consists of more than one access point. You might have to be planning a wireless infrastructure spanning a large building or several floors or whatever. So there are, if you're going to be putting in multiple access points, at some point it's probably beneficial, useful to use, for example, in a Cisco environment, there's some wireless or there's some site survey software. It's pretty expensive stuff, but it gives you sort of hot spot details about coverage areas and does a variety of other things. You can import your plans and blueprints from like CAD CAM drawings and other things to that effect. Like in this example, what do we got here? We've got we've got a conference room that we notice that smaller access area. That implies to me that we're trying to limit access to the conference room area only on that particular network potentially. I've got another network that covers the rest of the workspace, a little larger access area. I've got those two green ones would be private networks. That red one would be more or less a public network that allows users to watch Netflix and stuff while they're in the reception area, but that doesn't kind of slop over into the workspace, and the workspace doesn't slop over much into the public area there. So again, there's and then you've got things like walls and doors, and in the kitchen area you've got things like microwave ovens, and that magnetron inside a microwave oven operates in the 2.4 gigahertz frequency range, the same as some of your Wi-Fi stuff. So there are plenty of things your survey needs to take into account in terms of interference and other issues. But you don't just randomly put access points wherever they look best. You conduct a survey, you determine where's the optimal placement for these things, and determine things like antenna design and output power and what's going to work best in your network. And there's some pretty functional software available in this area, this site survey area. What should we do, right? Anything you don't want captured by unknown parties, keep it off of there in the first place. But if you're going to have it on there, make sure it's encrypted. Antivirus software on your devices, your laptops and your phones and things, of course. Hardening techniques, that goes for everything that's on the network. Use your VPN technology with IP security. Site survey, again, to kind of design the optimal setup for your environment. Use some security. Don't now open Wi-Fi is basically a recipe for disaster. You should have some sort of security enabled. Preferably the best and most powerful security that everybody supports. Ideally, that's WPA2 with AES, but sometimes that may not be the case. Authentication and access control mechanisms are good rather than just having a completely free-for-all public kind of network. Intrusion detection sensor. We want to be on the lookout for these rogue access points that can pull our users away from the legitimate access points and have them connect to this rogue access point where they're not on our network really at all. Even though MAC filtering and SSID cloaking, those are both good things. You should do those things. But that does not completely protect your network. I mean, if that's all you're doing to protect yourself, you think you're protecting, you're really not, because of the 1%ers are out there that know how to get around a MAC address filter, know how to deal with the fact that you've turned off cloaking, or turned off a broadcast. So again, even though those are good security techniques and everybody uses them, don't fool yourself into thinking you're more secure than you are. Use captive portals. Introduce a little accountability into the use of your wireless network. Your vendors, they have all sorts of recommendations on how to properly configure stuff and do things and whatever. Do that. And like before, we talked about, once you harden everything, once you turn off all the stuff you think you need to turn off, verify that everything still works like it's supposed to. Because in your hardening efforts, you may have turned off something that you actually need, that you didn't realize you need, but you do. And then, of course, the most important thing is document everything. So it's kind of general guidelines, but these are all important. I believe that takes us to the end of chapter 4. So we got about. Let's take a break here. Let's break for about 15. So we'll go. We'll pick back up in 15 minutes, and then we'll get into chapter 5 until time to break for the day.